Once again, we'd like to welcome you to today's Rypple webinar, Coachable Moments. At this time, I'd like to turn things over to your host for today's session, Mr. Nick Stein, Director of Content and Media at Rypple. Nick?
Thanks so much. Welcome, everyone, to the latest webinar in Rypple's Leadership Series. We are incredibly excited to have the influential and well-respected executive coach and author, Scott Eblin, with us today. Scott is the author of a great book, which I highly recommend all of you to go out and get. It's called The Next Level, What Insiders Know About Executive Success. And he's going to be sharing some insights from that book and from the work that he does with leaders across the country. Before I introduce Scott, I'd just like to take a moment to say a few words about today's subject, which is really what can leaders out there do to help their people get to the next level in their careers and to get to the next level themselves and to help their businesses get to the next level in terms of results and productivity. And it's a subject that we focus on a lot here at Rypple. We help companies, teams, and employees to set audacious goals and get the feedback, coaching, and recognition they need to stay on track and achieve those goals. And actually, today's a pretty exciting day for us because we just announced our new social goals application, which is called Social Goals 2.0. We built it together with Spotify, the fast-growing digital music service, and we based it on the proven objectives and key results management model, which was developed by Intel and widely adopted by some of the world's highest-performing companies, including Google, Zynga, and Spotify. And there's a good story about our new social goals in the Wall Street Journal today, so I'd encourage you to check that out if you're interested in learning more. Now, what's interesting about leadership is that there's a recent study that showed that 53% of employees said that even when their boss praised their excellent performance, the feedback that they got didn't really provide them with enough useful information to help them repeat that performance again. And in the same study by Leadership IQ, they found that 65% responded that when their boss criticized their poor performance, they also didn't provide enough useful information to help them correct the issue the next time. So what does this kind of data mean for leaders? To us it suggests that the biggest impact a leader can have is to really help to set a positive tone and tenor for an organization. And especially when it comes to that holy grail known as discretionary output, that magical thing when people feel tied to the larger mission and purpose of their organization and feel inspired to stay late and come in early. And that takes work, and it takes insight, and that's where our guest today comes in. Scott has coached managers and leaders at many world-class organizations, and we're very excited to have him here today with us to share his insights. So I'd now like to turn things over to Scott, and welcome.
Hey, Nick. Thank you very much, and good day, everybody. It's great to have so many of you joining us in this webinar this afternoon. Very excited about it and looking forward to a virtual conversation with you. Here's some thoughts about how we'll flow between now and the top of the hour. What I want to do is share some tools with you that I think will help you reach your goals throughout the day. And I hope that if you're a leader, and I imagine pretty much everybody on this webinar is a leader in some fashion, either formally or informally, one of the goals that I hope you have throughout every day is to be a really effective coach. A coach for the people that you work with, a coach for the people on your team, a coach for your peers. And I want to share some tools with you that will help you do that, help you be a better coach so you can reach your goals and the people that you work with can reach theirs more effectively, and everybody together. It's a happy and perfect place when that's going on day in and day out. What I'd like to ask from you is your participation. And we've got several hundred people on the call, so we can't do it vocally today. But as Rich said earlier, the moderator will have a few polls throughout. I'm going to have a couple of whiteboard chat slides. We've got a chat feature, of course, on the Cisco system, the WebEx system, but we're going to do something maybe new for you, but we'll put up a few whiteboards on the screen. I'll tell you how to do it when we get there. I'm going to pose some simple questions. We'd just like to see your simple responses in real time to those questions. And then finally, throughout this conversation this afternoon, I hope you'll take advantage of the Q&A feature on WebEx and submit your questions. And Nick will be paying close attention to those as I'm presenting and working with you through the polls and the chat slides, and we'll save some time at the end to answer as many of your questions as we can. So that's the game plan for the next 50 minutes or so, and let's get started. Here's the agenda. I said that's my game plan on flow. Here's the game plan for the agenda today. First, I want to set things up and establish a little bit of context around the challenges that I've seen in 11 years of coaching now and 15 years of corporate leadership experience prior to starting the coaching work that I do now. Some of the challenges that I see leaders grappling with and some of the opportunities they have to be even more effective than they already are. So we'll do a little bit of context setting. I want to spend most of our time sharing what I like to call news you can use. I hope that you'll leave this conversation this afternoon with at least one great idea that you can apply in real life, maybe later today or as no later than tomorrow. I call them coachable moments. One of the features of the second edition of the Next Level that came out about a year ago is a series of sidebars throughout the book called Coachable Moments. They're road-tested, field-tested coaching techniques that I've used with my clients over the years, and I know from the feedback that we get from clients and the results that I see them getting with these tools that they're really useful. Some of them are ones that I've come up with. Some of them are great classic coaching tools that I'm going to share with you that are developed by other folks, and I'll certainly give them credit when we get to those for their good work. Finally, I want to leave you with some ideas on some next steps, and then we'll get to some questions here before we get to the top of the hour. So we've got a lot to cover, so let me keep rocking forward. The setup. One of the things that I hear a lot about in my work is leadership presence. Or executive presence sometimes. It depends on, the kind of conversation we're having. But the big idea is presence. And how do you show up as a leader with your presence? I hear a lot about that in feedback that I'm conducting for clients. I hear a lot about that from clients themselves. They've gotten feedback that their leadership presence is strong or it could be stronger. And how do I do that? I think coaching is a big way to do that, not just on the receiving end of coaching, but also on the delivery side of the coaching equation. The better the coach you are, the more likely you are to be an effective leader. Here's how I think about leadership presence. I think you can break it down to three big things, three big categories. The first category for me in leadership presence is personal presence. And that's all about how you view yourself and how other people view you. It's about the way you connect with people. The way that you build relationships so that you and the folks you're working with can get the results that are expected of you. So that personal presence begins the idea of leadership presence. Second big category is team presence, and that's all about how you lead or leverage whatever team or teams it is that you're responsible for leading on a day-to-day, day-in and day-out kind of basis. So probably everybody on this call is involved or has been involved at some point in leading a team. So team presence is the second big category, and the last big category is organizational presence. How do you show up as a leader in the broader organization? What are the opportunities to coach peers, to coach your manager or your boss, and to lead in that kind of way to get stuff done sort of outside of your swim lanes, right? Not just staying within your guardrails and kind of living in your own little tight space, but really taking that outside-in point of view and looking at the bigger picture and saying, how do we lead to collectively to get where we want to go as an organization? So personal, team, and organizational presence. And that's really the model that my book, The Next Level, is organized around. It's also the model that I coach from a lot, and we kind of use it as a diagnostic. And there's a little bit more here on this slide about the diagnostic that I'm coming from. You can see on the left, we've got those three big categories: personal, team, and organizational presence. And then different sets of behaviors that I've learned over the years leaders either need to pick up or let go of as they're moving into situations that require different results. And when you're moving into one of those situations, it can be because you were promoted, you're in a new job with bigger responsibilities, or maybe you're in the same job you've been in for a while, but for whatever reason, the scope has changed. It feels like a bigger job. We hear a lot these days about people having to do more with less in the economic environment that we're in, and really kind of pushing on productivity. So a lot of leaders are doing twice or even three times as much as they used to do, and that's a result of expectations change. Or maybe just your competitive environment is changing. Pretty much everybody's competitive environment is changing these days. So what do you have to pick up? What do you have to let go of to get the different results that are expected? Because if you need to get different results, you probably have to do things differently. And you can see we've got different sets of behaviors, 3 sets for each of those 3 big categories: personal, team, and organizational, around things you need to pick up, like confidence, and things you need to let go of, like doubt and how you contribute. Or picking up team reliance and letting go of self-reliance. Or picking up that left, right, and diagonal view of the environment you're working in, and not just looking up and down as you lead, or picking up that outside-in view of the entire organization and letting go of that inside-out view that whatever I'm working on is the most important stuff and everything else can just wait. It's that outside-in view, and what are we trying to do in this organization, and if we understand that result, we can reverse engineer back from that to determine what we do day to day to get that bigger result. So picking up and letting go is kind of the framework that I'm coming from. And, that picking up and letting go is not just a leadership question, and it's not just an organizational life question. I think it's probably a whole life question. If you think about your life as a whole, it's a series of transitions, picking up and letting go. It's, that when you leave home for the first time, your parents' home for the first time, there's a picking up and letting go dynamic there. Moving from single life to married life, or being with a partner, is a picking up and letting go thing. Being a parent without kids, or in a relationship without kids versus moving into parenthood, a huge picking up and letting go thing. So here's the first poll question of the day, and you can answer it from whatever context you want to answer it, either your organizational life or your whole life. But the question, Rich, if we can get ready for it, is which do you think is harder, picking up or letting go? And we've got the A or B choice on the screen there. If you could just click the one that you think is more challenging and click submit, and our moderator, Rich, will share the results here with us in a moment. What do we have so far, Rich?
We've got about 150 who've responded. I'll go ahead and...
That's a nice number. Let's go with that.
Okay, I'll go ahead and close it out.
And we need a drum roll here as we wait for the results. You can guess what's your guess on what it's going to be. Let's see what we've got.
And here you go.
All right. Wow, look at that. 85% of you say letting go. And this would be a great time for a whiteboard, but I'm going to save it. Here's what I'll tell you, based on experience in doing hundreds of presentations around this material over the last several years, is the group here is pretty much aligned with every other group that I've talked to. Letting go, far and away, is usually chosen as the more challenging of the two. Now, why is that? If you go back to this next level table and you look at the things that are in picking up, a lot of those are cognitive kind of challenges. It's learning how to do something new in many ways. And if you're in a leadership role, chances are you're a pretty intelligent person and you're pretty good at learning new things. So picking up is something you've probably been doing your whole life. Letting go, I would say, is more of an emotional challenge, because now I'm pushing my comfort zone. now I'm getting kind of uncomfortable because, I might be letting go of stuff that's worked for me up until now. But now that I'm here, my scope is so much bigger. It's so much more challenging. I can't operate that way anymore. And it kind of leads to our first poll question of the day. I'm going to skip a couple of slides in the interest of time, and maybe I'll go back to those while we're waiting on the poll results. Here's the question. Do you think of yourself, or do others think of you as a go-to person? Wow, you're such a go-to person. How many of you think of yourself that way, have thought of yourself that way? You get that feedback all the time. Wow, you're a great go-to person. What do we have on that? We got the poll up there again. Click either yes or no on the go-to person. We've got anonymous opportunities here, so you can be completely honest with not worry about embarrassing yourself if you say yes on this, or no for that matter. Go ahead and answer it and click submit. We have a number of responses, Rich.
We're actually beyond 150. I'll go ahead and close
Okay,
things
let's close it out and see what we've got. So I'm kind of curious to see how this one turns out.
Okay, here come the results.
Okay. Wow, check that out. 94% of you are go-to people. Now let's talk about what that means. The highest rated behaviors that I have on this screen come from a next level self-assessment that we've been using with audiences and clients. It's actually available for free on the Eblin Group website if you want to check it out. A next level self-assessment where we're asking them to assess themselves on 27 different behaviors related to that pick up and let go model that I shared with you. And here are what we're seeing lately through self-assessments and 360-degree assessments, what we're seeing lately in terms of how people rate themselves on the high end of the behaviors. And look at some of the words that pop out here. Accountable. Whoops, let me get that back. Accountable is a big word. It's for some reason that little thing's not working. There we go. Accountable is a big word. Timely decisions. Open and honest dialogue. That's a great one. Clear about the outcomes. Another one with accountable again, and solving problems. It's all about getting stuff done. I mean, that's what I see a lot with the people that I work with. On the low end, take a look at this. This is the lowest rated behavior, and it has been for years in our research. Pacing yourself by building regular breaks from work, or managing your workload so you have time for unexpected problems or issues. Or maybe you're so busy that you can't even give people your full presence and attention, and it's like go, 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 do, do, do. And maybe what's going on here, if you're like a lot of the folks I've been working with, you're so busy doing stuff on the high end that maybe you don't see what needs to be done. And that's probably because 94% of you are saying you're go-to people. You're really, really busy people, and you're getting stuff done. But here's the challenge with that. It's kind of like the difference between cutting your own grass and managing a lawn care service that cuts 100 yards a week. A lot of people actually like to cut their own grass, because in 45 minutes or an hour you can do something tangible and see the results, and it's really kind of satisfying and a little bit mindless maybe, but it's really, you get the result, and that's cool. But if you own that lawn care service that's 100 yards a week, there's no way you can cut all that grass by yourself, or at least do it well. And so, you're moving from being responsible for your own yard to being accountable for 100 families' yards. And it's the same thing with go-to person versus go-to people. How do we make that shift from being that go-to person to creating teams of go-to people so that we can get those bigger results that are continuously expected of us? So let's try a whiteboard exercise very quickly here. I'm going to activate that, and here's the way it works. If you look at your screen, you've got a big T over there on the right. It's the second icon, on the left. There's a big T, second icon on the left, and you can use your keyboard to type in your answer to this question. It's going to ask the question, what's the biggest challenge? There you go. What's the biggest challenge in building teams of go-to people? Just give me your 2 or 3 word response. What's the biggest challenge to building teams of go-to people? and we should see some answers coming up here in real time on the board. Turf wars, that's a good one. What else is a big challenge in building teams of go-to people? Trust, communications, it looks like, office politics, slowing down to teach. Look at the people are scared of it, the confrontation of it, having faith in them, the whole empowerment issue, guiding others to be empowered, company culture, organization culture might have a problem with that, the coordination, the expertise. Oh, my gosh, so many great reasons. We can't even read them all, right? But you can see what your colleagues online here are saying, and probably a lot of this, as it fills up, looks familiar to you. I bet you there's stuff on here that you can relate to that, wasn't your first answer, but it would be your second or third answer. Lack of follow-through, lots of great issues. So let's talk about, if we can move on, let's talk about the ways to deal with some of those challenges in creating go-to people, teams of go-to people. I think there's a big question you want to ask yourself as we get into this part of the conversation. This is Archimedes, the inventor of the lever, and it's all about leveraging yourself as a leader. And here's the big question. What is it that only I can do? And let me say a word about what that's not about. It's not about being personally indispensable, like, oh, my gosh, I am so fabulous and so amazing at this that I am the only person that can do it. I don't mean it that way. What I mean is, what is it, given the role that you're in and all of the resources and visibility and authority and access and coaching opportunities and vision casting opportunities, everything that comes with that unique role that you're in as a leader, given all that, what is it that only you can do? Because guess what? You're the only person in that role for your organization. There may be there may be multiple people in a similar role, but for you and your team, you're the only one in that role. So what is it that only you can do? And I would suggest that one of the things that only you can do is be the coach, be the leader as coach. And I want to spend the rest of our time today kind of with a case study, sort of like Law and Order, ripped from today's headlines. Real life. Our heroine here is Amy. She looks very happy because she has her life under control as a leader. And here she is at her desk first thing in the morning. She's getting ready to review her calendar for the day, and she's creating a game plan for the day and how she's going to use coachable moments. She's a great client. She's read The Next Level. How she's going to use coachable moments from the next level to be effective as a leader throughout her day. So let's take a look at her calendar. We saw her at 8:15. She's getting to the office, at a reasonable early hour to kind of review, think about her day, step back, take a deep breath. What am I trying to do here? How am I trying to do it? The first scheduled event on her calendar is a career planning conversation. She's seen the research. She's struggled with it herself about pacing herself by building in breaks. So she actually schedules a couple of breaks during the day, the first one at mid-morning. She's got an executive team presentation planning session with her team. They're doing a big presentation for the executive team in a couple of weeks, so they're going to talk through what they're going to do. Then she's taking another break at the middle of the day to have lunch with a friend. Coming back in at 1:30 for a coaching conversation with one of her project leaders. Another little micro break in the afternoon, and then she's got an all-hands meeting at the end of the day where she's got to fire up the troops and really tie people into the bigger picture. Throughout the day, she's doing the MBWA, the management by walking around and staying engaged in conversations. So what I want to do over the next half hour or so is show you how she's going to use some of these coachable moment tools to get herself through her day in a very effective way. So one of the things that she's thinking about all day long is something that she's learned from Olympic athletes. So we've got a bunch of Olympic athletes here. The skier in the middle is Lindsey Vonn right here. And if you had a chance to watch Lindsey Vonn in the last Winter Olympics, you might have noticed that she did the same thing at the top of the mountain before every race that she ran or skied. And if I were live with you in live, I would just ask you, what'd she do? So I'll pretend that I did that. And what she did, if you remember, is she pulled her goggles down over her face. She had her ski poles in her hand up there in the starting house in the gate, and then she closed her eyes and started swaying back and forth. So what was she doing? She was visualizing the course because she had ran it in practice runs. She had skied it in previous heats. And she was thinking about, where do I need to really hit it hard on the turns? Where do I need to crouch down to pick up the speed? Where am I really going to accelerate through? so that I win the race? So she's asking herself a couple of questions, basically. What am I trying to do, and how do I need to show up to make that likely? And I would argue that that visualization process is something that you can apply in realms far beyond sports. So our buddy Amy back here, she's doing the same thing. She's looking at her calendar all day long thinking, okay, in each of these meetings, what am I trying to do, and how do I need to show up to make that likely? You know, if I'm wildly successful in that all-hands meeting, what happens? What are people knowing, thinking, doing, feeling, believing? And how do I need to show up to make that likely? That's just one example. So that's kind of her coachable moment that she's keeping in mind throughout the day, is that visualization process inspired by Olympic athletes and all other world-class athletes in any sport. What's the outcome I'm trying to create, and how do I need to show up to make that outcome likely? So keep that in mind as we go through. And then we get to the very first scheduled event on Amy's calendar, which is a career planning conversation. So she's going to be meeting with Brian. And Brian is a guy that's been on her team for a while, a year or more. He's a pretty high performer, has some big ambitions. Amy feels like there's more that he could do in his career, but he's also one of those guys that, you know, he's like so eager that sometimes he kind of gets out ahead of things, right? And that's good until it's not good anymore. And it's, you know, and when it's not good is when things sort of kind of, you know, get out of control to a degree, and, you know, there are surprises, and you kind of have to clean up after the surprises and so forth. So Amy, you know, what am I trying to do in this conversation with Brian? I want him to really be engaged. I don't want to dampen his enthusiasm, but I want him to kind of play a little bit more inside the lanes, right? You know, and really focus all that energy and talent in ways that make a big difference. And so the model she's going to use for that conversation and the way she's going to show up, or help her show up, is a model that was developed by David Peterson and Mary D. Hicks back when they were both with Personnel Decisions International. They both have moved on to other firms now. But it's called GAPS, and you can see it's basically a 2x2 that starts in the upper right-hand corner. And the first row is about Brian's point of view in this example, and the bottom row is Amy and other people's point of view about what's going on. And so Brian has some goals, you know, like, yeah, I want more responsibility. I want to do fun and interesting things. I want to make a difference, you know, all those goals. So we can start the conversation, if you're Amy, by saying, so Brian, you know, what do your goals look like? Let's talk about that. What do you really want to do? And then the next question is, so Brian, what do you think you're bringing to the table? You know, how do you see your abilities, and what do you see the match between those and the goals? Have a conversation about that. And so, yeah, you know, get down to the perceptions. I agree with pretty much everything you said, Brian. I mean, I see that. Here are some examples of how I see this. This is getting back to Rypple here. Great feedback is always illustrated, I think, with examples. It wasn't just, hey, good job on that. It was great job on that, and here's why it was a great job. And specifically, here's what I saw you doing. And, man, if you can keep doing that, that would be awesome. So Amy's sharing her perceptions of Brian's abilities, right? But she said, you know, I'm seeing some other things too. Like, you know, sometimes we're not in sync with each other, and we get out of control with each other a little bit. So we need to get back in control, because here's what I'm expecting, right? And so, yeah, I get you on the goals, and I'm with you on that. I think it's all possible, but here's what's going to get you and me there faster if we meet these kinds of standards. And there's a lot of ways you can use a model like this. You could think, you know, you can go kind of in the order that I just talked about, or you can go, you know, let's talk about your goals first and the standards for what are expected for somebody that has your goals, or you could talk about how your abilities match up against the standards. I mean, you know, there's all kinds of ways to use a model like this, but I found it over the years, both personally as I've managed people in different teams, and for my clients as they manage folks. It's a really effective tool to have a developmental kind of coaching conversation, GAPS. And you can make it a conversation, exactly that, instead of that one way, you know, let me tell you how it's going to be kind of deal. You can really have a collaborative conversation using this model. So we may have some questions on that, and we'll check those out before we wrap up here at the top of the hour. So that's a pretty interesting way to start your day, because, you know, those performance planning conversations, career planning conversations can, you know, you hope they go well, but a little bit of stress involved as you're thinking about that. So she scheduled herself a break. And I said earlier, from our research on the next level stuff, pacing yourself by building in breaks, regularly taking time to step back and define or redefine what needs to be done, things like that. We're so busy doing stuff, it's hard to see the opportunities for taking breaks. So what does a break even look like is an interesting question. And I used some ideas from an author named David Kuntz, K-U-N-D-T-Z. He wrote a great book several years ago called Stopping, How to Be Still When You Have to Keep Going. And David says that there are three kinds of breaks that we get in our life. The first is a grinding halt. And if you think about what those might look like, they can either be voluntary or, unfortunately, involuntary. But they're those extended periods of time when you get some time away from whatever it is you've been doing day in and day out. Don't happen very often. Stopovers, we can create those. It might be putting your iPhone away for the evening or your iPad away for the evening and not checking the email and really just kind of focusing on who you're with or reading a book, like an actual physical book or something like that, just unplugging for some period of hours or days from your normal flow. But what Amy's going to take advantage of here at the 10 o'clock hour is a little still point. And these are these brief cues or interludes that you get throughout the day to just take a break. I mean, if you look at your calendar, even if you think you're racked and stacked on your calendar like Amy kind of is today, you probably get 5 or 10-minute interludes throughout the day that if you're thoughtful about it, you can use to kind of push the reset button, from that last meeting and getting ready for the next thing. One great way to do that, I'm going to do it right now, do it with me if you like, is take a deep breath. So I'm going to breathe in and kind of hold it for a minute or a second, not a minute, I'd pass out, and then kind of blow out, And if you do that 3 times, you're literally cleaning your brain because all these neurochemicals build up in there from that last conversation. By taking those series of deep breaths, you oxygenate yourself. And if you want to take it a step further, I do this with clients all the time in our group coaching programs and the workshops that I lead. Stand up, stretch it out, like push towards the ceiling with your arms and really stretch and then breathe and then blow out and do it again. Stretch up again and blow out. And maybe even do a bend from the waist and just kind of hang and let your head hang down. It's like 2 minutes of yoga in the middle of the day. Combining that with the breathing, it's a great way to recycle your body so that your mind is ready for the next thing. So that's exactly what Amy did at the 10 o'clock hour, kind of clear out the Brian conversation, get ready for the next thing, which is the executive team presentation planning conversation. So again, they've got this presentation coming up in a couple of weeks for the executive team, and how are we going to do it? What's the plan for that, and how are we thinking about it? And the big framework from the Coachable Moments idea that Amy's going to walk her team through is what, so what, and now what. I'm not sure who created this. I first heard it from Dave Ulrich, who's an amazing HR guru from the University of Michigan, has his own firm, RBL Group. And I heard Dave present this when I was working with him in corporate America years ago. What, so what, and now what? Those are the 3 questions we've got to answer for any communication exchange. In this case, the executive presentation. So what? What's the topic or point? What are we really trying to get across to the executive team? As we think about this and brainstorm what we're doing and how we're doing it, what's our main point? Or what are our 3 main points? What are we talking about? And then now what? So what? Why should this team care? What's in it for them? You got to answer the with them. What's in it for me? In this case, what's in it for the executive team? And I talk in the next level about picking up custom-fit communications and letting go of one-size-fits-all communications. This is where you really start to custom-fit the communications, is by answering the so what, because that so what is going to be different for each person or group that you're having the conversation with. You got to put yourself in their shoes. The executive coach Tim Galway's got a great process called transposing. Act as if you are the other person or that group, and ask yourself 3 questions. What do I think? How do I feel? And what do I want? So Amy might lead her team through that conversation about the executive team. What are they thinking? How are they feeling? Based on what they're thinking and how they're feeling, what do they want? That helps you figure out the answer to what's in it for them. And then finally, now what? What do we want them to know, do, think, feel, believe as a result of our presentation? What's the ask? ASK. What's the request we're making of the executive team? What kind of direction or feedback are we looking for at the end of the conversation? Let's not make them guess about that. Let's be clear about what the ask is, whatever it is. So what, and now what is what Amy's going to use as a coachable moment kind of tool to frame that planning conversation for the executive team presentation. So that took about, in real time, took about an hour for her team to brainstorm through that, get their notes down, begin to sketch out the deck they're going to use for the presentation, and what stories they're going to use to illustrate, which is even more important than the deck, by the way. What stories are they going to use? And so she's had a pretty busy morning so far, gotten some things done. It's time for lunch, and she's like a no-agenda lunch. It's purely social. Let's get outside, have a change of scenery. It's time to refresh, reconnect. If you're really super serious about your leadership, great way to renew your personal presence is to establish some connections with people and bring that energy back to the office for the afternoon. So she's back, and her next conversation or her next meeting is with one of her project leads, and she's trying her objective, thinking about the Lindsey Vonn example again, what she's trying to do in this next conversation is help her project team leader get unstuck. That leaders has shared with Amy that she's just kind of stuck, really kind of at a loss for ideas about what she can do next. So, and how to keep this project moving down the road. And so Amy wants to be supportive of that, but she doesn't want to be, well, let me give you the answers, because that doesn't really develop anybody, right? I mean, if Amy's always giving the answers, she's just going to be stuck still being the go-to person. She's trying to develop teams of go-to people, so she's really using the coaching skills to help develop their capacity. Here's the model she's going to use. It's called GROW. Some of you have probably seen this before. A lot of people claim credit for this model. I usually give it to John Whitmore, who wrote a book many years ago called Coaching for Performance. And it's an acronym. As you can see, it stands for what's the goal, what's the reality, what are the options, and what's next. And just for the sake of time, I'm sharing 4 of my favorite questions. I've got a whole list of questions that I employ with this model, but 4 of my favorite questions for the GROW model. The first question I like is so great. So let's say Amy's meeting with Susan. Susan, you're stuck right now. If you were unstuck, what would success look like? If we could get this thing really cooking in the right direction, what would it look like? And then Amy's job, after she asks that question, is to be quiet and let Susan talk. I always say as a coach, the biggest thing I do for my clients is give them the chance to listen to themselves think. And that's exactly what Amy's trying to do for Susan. Susan, talk out loud. What would success look like? So they have that kind of conversation. Then one of the big questions that I like to ask in the reality space is, so what's going on now? What's happening? Okay, talk. Well, how do you know that's happening? What's the data tell us? And what have you tried so far? Okay, so yeah, you've gotten to this point and you're kind of stuck. What have you tried so far? And then we get to the options. So what else could you try? And here's a hint on that. What else could you try? When you get to that, ask it. That's a multiplication sign there. Ask that at least 3 times. Well, I've tried this. Okay, great. What else could you try? Gosh, I don't know. I could try that. Okay, perfect. What else could you try? Amy, you're killing me. Yeah, I know. What else could you try? Oh, man, I don't know. I guess I could try that. Okay, good. And so people want to give their first response and sort of stick with that, and that's sometimes why they get stuck. You can use a model like this and that what else could you try question to really get them unstuck, to open up the possibilities. So out of all those possibilities, what's the one that you would do if there were no constraints? And so out of all that stuff with no constraints, what could you pick out of that you can do right now? And that gets us to the last box of the model. So what are your next few steps? And we're not trying to solve for the next 100 steps, right? We're just trying to solve for the next 1 or 2 steps, because that looks like forward progress. And we can have another conversation next week if you need to and talk about the next 2 or 3 steps after that. But what are the next few steps? What kind of support will you need from me? And so forth. Here's the thing. I've used this with hundreds of clients over the years with a little richer script than what I was able to share today. You could have a really rich coaching conversation in 8 minutes or less. I wouldn't say less. In 8 minutes, you can have a really rich coaching conversation, 2 minutes per category, and move people to their next steps. And that's really what you're trying to do, is get them engaged, keep the progress moving, and build their capacity. So pretty good meeting that Amy had with Susan. Came up with some ideas, and it's good for now. So that gets us to the another break in the afternoon. We've already talked about how to do that, maybe a walk around the building or some stretching or whatever it is. And she's thinking now about, during that break, she's thinking about, okay, I got this all-hands meeting. What am I really trying to do here? Okay, yeah. I want them excited. I want them energized. I want them really understanding how they fit into the bigger picture. Those are the outcomes I'm trying to create on that all-hands meeting at the end of the day. And I need to show up with a pretty high level of energy to do that. I need to show up really committed. So I'm really visualizing, if I'm Amy, what does that look like and feel like? From the inside out, what does that feel like? And so one of the things that she's using from a coachable moment standpoint to bring all that together for people and the energizing and the engagement and helping people understand how they fit in is a model from William Bridges, who wrote a fantastic book. Everybody on this call needs to own a copy of it. It's called Managing Transitions, because I guarantee you everybody on this call will have to lead a team through change at some point. You probably already have. Fantastic book on that. One of the models that Bridges uses in that book that I use all the time with my clients is the 4 Ps. And it starts out with purpose. What are we here to do? Why do we exist? And it's kind of like the existential kind of question. And then the next P is, what's the picture? So what would it look like if we were fulfilling our purpose on a regular basis? And Amy's reminding her team of that. It's because it's been a while since the last all hands. So let's step back and define or redefine what we need to do and why we're doing it. Remember why we're here? We're here to do, that's just like an amazing mission we've got. It's so exciting. And here's what it looks like when we're doing that. We've been doing that. Here's what it's going to look like over the next 6 months. And then the third P is, what's the plan? And here's the plan for the next 6 months. Step by step, here's how we're going to get there. And then the last P is maybe the most important one for engagement. Here's how you fit in. And you can talk about that in the team as a whole, but it's also the kind of conversation that Amy can have with her directs, and they can have with the people that are on their teams. How do you fit in to this bigger picture? And, I work with a lot of clients who get feedback that they could be maybe more strategic. They're kind of good on the day-to-day stuff, but they're not so good on the strategic stuff. This is a great model to marry the two, because if you think about it, everything above this line is about strategy. What's the purpose and what's the picture? Everything below this line is about tactics. How are we going to get there, and how do you all fit in to how we're going to get there? Let's have a conversation about that. This is my take on it. Maybe let's have a collaborative conversation about what adjustments do we need to make to the plan. What would you add to that picture so you can feel like you're a part of this? But Amy's using this as the framework to get things started. So that is pretty much Amy's scheduled day, and we've shared a number of coachable moments. We've got about 10 minutes left. I've got some ideas to wrap us up here, but let me ask you, I've got what's next. I'm going to frame the question a little bit. What's next for you? What's one idea that you've heard today that you want to know more about, or that you've gotten enough and you just want to take it and try it out? It could be the GROW model. It could be the visualization. It could be something that came up in your own mind that I didn't talk directly about, but it just prompted ideas of your own. Let's use that text feature again, that text tool, and use your own keyboard and just give me a few written shout-outs here about what are your takeaways? What are you going to do? What might you want to apply back in your real life? What are some of the ideas you've heard here today that you want to apply? That's always a risky question for a presenter to ask with no notice. So I'll give you a few more seconds. You're not going to hurt my feelings if you don't have anything, but what is one? Oh, there you go. Thank you. All at once. Must start letting go the gaps with your manager. I like turtles. I do too. I'm not sure what the emphasis is there. Implication is the GROW model, a lot of that, the 8-minute coaching sessions. GROW is a big one. Yeah, it's a great model. Using the 4 Ps, framing the communication, terrific stuff. Renewing your energy, that's huge, right? And don't forget the still points on renewing your energy. Break time for sure. Break time without your electronic device. Taking a break, coaching for results, great. Love it. I'm glad you've gotten some value out of this. We've got a cute little picture going on there. and somebody can explain to me what that means later, and then a whole bunch more ideas. So good. I'm glad you've gotten some value from this. So let me give you some ideas about what you can do next. This is a picture of Aristotle, and not to get all Aristotelian on you, but this is one of my guiding philosophies as a coach and really as a human being. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act but a habit. My encouragement for you is to pick one thing for now. Pick one thing that would make a difference in your effectiveness as a leader. It might be a coachable moment tool that we've used, and you commit to trying it once or twice a week for a month, or it might be a leadership behavior that you've gotten some feedback on that you know you could do to be better. Maybe you're using Rypple, and there's some behavior changes you want to make. And here's my encouragement for you as you try to develop some new positive habits around whatever you're trying to do to be a more effective leader and a more effective coach, is to look for the things that are in that sweet spot between easy to do and likely to make a difference. And I will basically say you never even have to leave the sweet spot. Pick one or two things to do until you master habits there, and then pick one or two more easy things to do, and pretty soon you're going to be a more effective leader. It comes down to this idea from the late, great John Wooden, the great basketball coach at UCLA. When you improve a little each day, eventually big things occur. You're looking for the small improvement one day at a time, and when that happens, it really lasts. It's what the Japanese call kaizen, continuous improvement through small steps. And here's the secret, I think, really. You might have 10 or 12 things that you think you need to work on right now. I would say forget about 8 to 10 of those and focus on one or two. Focus on the one or two things that would make the biggest difference now in your effectiveness as a leader. Easy to do, likely to make a difference. And there's so much interconnectivity across leadership behaviors that if you can get better, like at listening, for instance, and you develop some action steps like not interrupting people, and you bring your colleagues in and tell them that you're working on that, and could they help you with that by letting you know when you're interrupting them, in 30 to 60 days, you're going to be a better listener, and that makes a big difference. Are you going to be a 100% better listener? Maybe not, but is 20% better than zero? Yeah. Is 5% a week sound like much? No, but 5% a week, week after week, and a month you're 20% better, in 2 months you're 40% better. So boil it down, narrow it down, and work that step-by-step personal improvement plan. You can do the same thing in coaching your folks with the Coachable Moments. Would love to stay connected, different ways to do that. And Nick, I'm hoping that we've got some questions that we can answer in the 6 or 7 minutes that we have remaining.
We definitely do, and thanks, Scott. Before we get to questions, just wanted to say I found that to be both inspiring and useful. I think that here at Rypple, we very much believe that you can't really invent new behaviors. What you can do is find ways to take things that people already want to do and amplify the benefits and sort of reduce the friction. And I think a lot of the ideas and suggestions that you've thrown out today are things that people can do if they put their mind to it, and probably are already doing to some small degree, and it's just a matter of making a commitment out of it. So, one question that came up that was interesting, how can I overcome employees' habit of running from the office as soon as the job time ends? Why don't they understand deadlines and goals? I'll let you answer in a second, but from our perspective, we think that deadlines and goals should be an ongoing conversation between a manager and their people and their team that happens all the time, and setting those expectations and holding people accountable is a big part of that. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that subject.
Yeah, I saw that question come up earlier, Nick, and my thought on that is let's kind of look at the root cause that maybe underlies the question, and I would suggest that a possible root cause around people kind of running out the door at 5 o'clock or whatever quitting time is engagement. right? Are they really engaged with what you're there to do as a team or an organization? And so how can you get them engaged? I think, one is to have the kinds of coaching conversations that we've been talking about today. Really tune in to what's important to them, the what, so what, now what, the GAPS model. I think the 4 Ps model that we talked about today, the coachable moment on that, here's the purpose in the picture, and most importantly, here's how I see you fitting in. What else would make this, interesting or exciting for you? People have lives outside of work, obviously, but I think and you need to, but I think I would encourage the questioner to take a look at his engagement or her engagement strategies and maybe try some of these coachable moment tools and see if it helps move the needle a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and it's sort of related to this next question, which is if firing an employee is not an option, what can you do to motivate him or her to perform better and increase productivity instead of spending hours chatting with colleagues? I mean, in our experience, often people waste time or are unproductive because they don't really know what they should be focused on, and they aren't engaged. And, some of the goal-setting exercises that you went through in terms of really figuring out, what the right work is for people to be working on that's both satisfying to them and moves the business forward. But what are some other strategies you can suggest to kind of motivate and engage people?
I think back to Ken Blanchard and Paul Hersey's work on situational leadership, and one way to frame that is it a skill issue or is it a will issue, right? And sometimes it's both or sometimes it's one or the other. And it sounds like in this scenario it's probably more will, like is the person really interested in this stuff? So, again, I'm asking root cause kind of questions. Why do they find talking to their colleagues all day long more interesting than the work that you'd like for them to do, or that you're paying them to do? What can you do to make the work more interesting? And I'm not putting it all on the manager. I mean, sometimes it's it's the wrong fit or it's the wrong hire in the first place. And I kind of question the assumption about if you can't fire somebody. I think HR kind of gets a lot of grief in a lot of organizations, and sometimes it's deserved, and sometimes it's not, about all the hoops you have to jump through to move somebody on to their next opportunity, is the polite way to say it. But before you get to that point, I'd really take a hard look at what can you do to really help them understand and shape the work so that it's interesting. And not knowing enough about the situation, I mean, I could be more specific, but I don't really know their situation. But I would look for ways to. I'd look at the root cause. I mean, okay, so why is chatting people up more interesting than doing the work, and what are the possibilities there? Maybe from the GROW model. So what else could you try? What else could you try? What else could you try? And at some point, you've tried everything that you can reasonably try, and you've got to make a move. But I would look at it maybe from a creative kind of, a collaborative kind of standpoint.
Well, it looks like we're at the top of the hour, so I just wanted to say thank you again for a fantastic presentation. I'm sure that everyone who joined today found it very useful and helpful. And for everyone, we will be posting the recording and the slides, so if you'd like to refer back to a lot of the stuff that Scott said today, you will have that opportunity very soon on our blog at rypple.com/blog. So thanks again, Scott, and thanks everyone for joining us today.
Okay, thanks, Nick. Really enjoyed it, everybody. Thanks for being here.